ॐ भद्रं कर्णैभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागं सस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all, thou art all, thou assumest all forms, thou art the origin and goal of all, thou art the self of all, thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace. ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्माम् अमृतं गमय. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, and from death, that is limited existence, to the immortal, eternal existence. Peace, peace, peace. I had been thinking of this topic for quite some time, and this is one of very important ideas in Vedanta, that we see that whatever we see, whatever we perceive, is it real? Is it the proof of existence? And if we don't see something, is it the proof of non-existence? Of course, one should see here that the word seeing connotes the for all sensory inputs, whatever we actually experience through all our sense organs is collectively put here symbolically as seeing. And the reason is obvious. Most part of our perception mechanism or experience mechanism is connected to the organ of vision. They say about 2/3 of the brain activity is seeing or something that is in conjunction with our visualization process. So therefore, for human beings, it is the seeing is believing, as they say, or it is said that the eyes are the windows for the soul. So, because the soul expresses as well as receives through the eyes, that eyes are therefore very important organ for human being, and that is why eyes here are symbolizing all our experience of this world and ourselves through all the sense organs, brain, mind put together. It is, suppose had it been the bats who are thinking on this topic, then the bats, their main organ, they see through what is called the ultrasound, these sound waves is their way of seeing. So they see very well, but that is, it is not the visual signal. It is the what we would call an audio signal through which their world is formed. So for them, if they would suppose a bat is to give this lecture, would be giving, is hearing the proof of existence, because for bats that is the major sense organ. For dogs, it is smelling is the major sense organ. So if the dog is to give this lecture, would say, is smelling the proof of existence. All put together, this is the idea that all sensual experience that we get, sensory experience that we get, the question is that the proof of existence of it? I mean, the reality of it? Is it or is it not real? That is the question. That I experience something, but does it mean that what I experience is real? Now, let us look at this, the various processes that go through, that one goes through, that it is. I will not spend much time on this because this is actually somewhat sidestepping, but it is important to see what happens when we experience something in this world, or even what we call as ourselves, like the body and the processes that go on, like digestion and the blood circulation, breathing within the body. All these that we experience, now there are various stages through which this experience gets generated for us. The first thing in that is our external those instruments, their openings, they receive the input from the objects. Of course, in Vedanta there is another idea as well, but I am not referring to that right now. When we are seeing what is happening, or when I am hearing what is exactly happening, it is that some signal from the world gets through those apertures, and then that signal travels to the brain through the nerves. The input gets carried through the nerves, which are very similar to the electric wires made only biologically, that is, the cell structure is there to them. So it is through these tissues, the signal gets carried to the brain. Now then the next process happens. It is that the brain has a program, a software that makes it this time, space, and the imageries, that actual imaging is done in the brain. It is very similar to various imaging devices that we use in medical sciences, as well as in getting the maps of our say Earth from satellites and all that. It is imaging, means there is a software that interprets those electric stimuli that get there. That sensation in yoga aphorisms, the first that input that comes is called shabda. And then what gets carried through to the brain is called earth. And then now what gets interpreted as the whole process, the imaging and the it is called jnana. So it is the imaging that happens, like when you have an MRI, a very commonly used technique in the medical science, and therefore it gets called also these days this medical imaging. That it is now this is a magnetic field disturbance that gets recorded, noted, and accordingly an image, a visual image gets generated. Again, similarly with what gets is called the ultrasound imaging. It is an image that gets generated there. So even in the brain, exactly, that electric input or the sensory input that gets there, now it needs to be interpreted. And there is this device, the software that interprets it. And for interpreting it, first it has a system, like what we use on a computer when we work. Many times we are not aware, but there is an operating system in which we work. So that operating system has to be put in there. So we have an operating system, that is, we take it for granted. And that operating system is time, space, and causation. In that operating system, we take it as if, this is happening here, it is happening there, but first that gets made in our brain. Therefore, we have, the like three-dimensional world, we say. The three dimensions are really not in the world as such, but our programming in the brain makes it three-dimensional. There are creatures, the studies have shown that there are many creatures whose world is one-dimensional world, not three-dimensional like us. So, therefore, this is actually not the actuality, but it is actuality as our brain has put it out there for us. So, this is how the image gets created. And then really the fun happens later. That what happens that gets processed further, that identifying the object with the help of, say, the previous impressions which are collected. Those previous impressions come in force while identifying the object. Like somebody sitting in front of me, the visual, that image is created in the brain. But then I refer to the earlier similar images and then say that this is Shrikant who is sitting in front of me. So it is, and it requires lot of really going back and forth from the storehouse of impressions, all those pictures get connected, because there are so many pictures which have been pigeonholed, which have the title Shrikant, a particular identification. So, all that really is happening, identification. And then what happens with that identification? So many things, so many files, as it were, open up, which have been tagged together with Shrikanta and have been pigeonholed there. This is very much like a system, where you have to put so many books in the library. So you make the cataloging for that. And you put that a number that the book will go into this slot, but you present it in such a way that it can be traced by some other ways also. People looking for some other thing also will be able to get the reference of this. So similarly, this is a very important aspect in our perception. To give you an idea that if only somebody is perceiving the image, but is not able to really, through that visual signal, able to connect to the actually the whole file, that one neurologist, he narrated it. He has written many nice books. I am forgetting his name right now. We have that book in our library. He was from New York and that area, so passed away not too long ago. So he gave an example. He got a case of a professor who was a teacher in art school, and then many started noticing some strange behavior in that person. So, because he would just say hello to a fire hydrant, or mistake somebody as that another known person, and so forth. So, when he was brought there, this neurologist put a simple rose flower in front of him, and then asked, "Do you identify? Do you know what it is?" And he said that, well, it is a convoluted shaped pink color object, but this it is because it is a complicated thing, I cannot really describe it. It is a convoluted pink color object. Can you name it? No. Then this neurologist put that rose towards his nose, and he exclaimed, "Oh, this is a nice rose." So how this identification came? Normally for a person through visual sense it would come. But now his visual sense was, although able to generate the exact visual image, was not able to connect it to the file that has this identification tag, rose, and which would be then connected through the smell. This happens with many neural that damaging to many people. Like another neurologist gave an example. He had a case where a man after accident could not recognize his mother, in the sense that he said that when his mother would see him, he would say, "She is an imposter. She looks exactly like my mother, but she is not my mother. She is an imposter." So it took quite some time for him to come to this realization that what he was seeing is actually his mother. So what I mean is that it is that processing requires getting exactly that experience that is pigeonholed to correspond to the visual or audio input to get an identification for it. Then the second this thing is, as you can see the bee, tagging it to other connected objects. Like you see that, oh, this person, Shrikant, sitting in front of me here, he is friend to other person, he hails from that city, and that city is like he there, and his, he likes this particular thing to eat, and then that connects to so many other people who like to eat the same thing, and so forth, So that is how that so many files get connected to that. So this is other objects get tagged. Then the third thing is still more interesting. Response. When you see something, there is a response that comes. Once you identify, then you have the feelings associated with that. They come into picture. And then that determines your action. That, okay, this person, I know, is a very boring fellow. So you just turn away from that person. This is a very friendly person. I needed to talk to him anyway. So you talk to that person. And so forth, your response. When you know, well, I had to, this business I have to do, and that person is connected with the same business, let me not lose this opportunity, let me contact that fellow right away and get my work done. This is a response. So the response and then the action that follows that identifying response, and then execution comes through what gets called as the organs of action. These 5 organs of knowledge and the 5 organs of action, through that the response gets executed. And again, there is now the process of storing it. Again, tag that experience, and again properly pigeonhole it. It's a very complex process, and that generates what we call our world view. And therefore, even though, we all have similar physical structure, our experience and our response is tremendously varied. Because although as brain, as hardware, almost all of us have same brain structure. But when it comes to the our life, that is, how we receive information, how we classify information, how we respond to that information is so much varied. Actually, for all purposes, that variety is infinite. Just to give an example, like you have that electronic, some gadgets, like say a CD, or what is called flash drive. CD is old these days, nobody uses. I was told they don't use CDs or DVDs, they use the flash drives. Okay. Now, you buy the flash drives of the same manufacturer, the same capability and all that, say 100 of them, and give it to the 100 people for their use. Now what happens? Now the differences start showing. Somebody will put lot of hip-hop music on that. Somebody will put, say, some classical music on that. Somebody who is not interested in music will put so many other things, say some lectures on Vedanta on it. Somebody would put a lot of accounting files and all such things on it. So all these things, now those, that hardware is same, but the information in each of these is very different, and when you connect that flash drive to a device where it opens up, you will see therefore different things will be shown, although it is the hardware is same. So similarly, although our brains structurally as hardware are identical more or less, yet there is infinite variety in our ways of perception and also the ways of responding. It is, and now, therefore, when we see this, this is how our world view gets constructed. This is, now let us see the problems that because of which this topic arose. And this is, everybody has this topic in their mind that gives rise to so many things. All our, every idea of religion is connected with that. Is that real? Also, the other ideas that come with it is that can we really come to the firm, final, unambiguous conclusions based on this perception or this experience? Because when we see, we come we run into many contradictions. And so we have these different layers of reality, different layers of existence, let us put it, that we see that it exists. I see, I sense, and I deal with it. It exists. Okay, but then in Vedanta, you see that this has been classified. This existence is classified into at various levels. We shall briefly see, because we have just about 1 hour and I have almost finished half the time. So let us see. That first is called the Vyavaharika Satya in Sanskrit, which means empirical or contextual day-to-day truth. Because it soon appears that what I see or what I experience is true given a context only. And since we live in a context, our actions, they take place in a given context. Now, that reality is very important in the context. I had told here some time back a little fun that I had called doctor's office for something, and then they customarily they ask, well, to identify, to verify that it is the same person. I was asked, tell what is your date of birth? And I told only the date, not the year. So I told, well, some 7 January. And then that attendant, the receptionist asked, what year? I said, well, every year it is the same. Now, it is true that every year the birth date is same. It is true, but not in the rather proper context. So, immediately, I told, well, I was joking. It is in such and such year. So, it is, now, if you ask, well, what is time now? It has a context. I say it is right now 5:31 p.m. But that is here. In California, it is different. Because now the area has changed, the time, these protocols they have changed. If in Australia it will be different time, so therefore how you measure the time, how you assign what is the meaning of 5 o'clock, all those things they are contextual, and so that is true in that realm alone. Beyond that, it doesn't have the authority, or it doesn't stand to be true beyond that. So this is with everything. As human beings, we perceive and draw certain conclusions. Now they are true for that person, but uh, say a mouse also perceives similar thing and is draws different conclusions. So it is for human world, this is the truth. It is a context that it is in that particular space time, it is true. In present these things, there are in the world total patients of corona so much, so many. You give a figure, but then the figure yesterday was different, and the figure tomorrow is going to be different. In fact, it changes every minute. So, therefore, this is true in a particular time context, that it is so many people were sick, and that too so many, there might be many more sick. The accounted ones are so many. So it is like that. It is in a given context. This has been mentioned that it is. This is called therefore vyavharika satta, empirical or contextual day-to-day truth. We will see a little more detail of this later. Pratibhasika satya, an illusory appearance even in the day-to-day life due to contradictions involved. Then the paramarthik satya, and true for all time, space, and causal variations. We shall deal a little more on that. And then the last one, which is not really found in most traditional Vedantic ideas, but this is a very important and very beautiful idea, especially in the context of what Sri Ramakrishna taught. And this is called anadhyasta vivarta. Since it doesn't come in any well-known texts of Vedanta, at least I have not found. I have found it in some other texts, but they are not considered the fundamental primary texts of Vedanta. That this is the anadhyasta vivarta. So non-superimposed and yet not absolute reality. So this is, let us see now each one. Already I have discussed the vyavharik satya, empirical or contextual day-to-day truth. We cannot say that it is false while we are actually perceiving and dealing with it. It is not false at this level. That has to be remembered. When we read many books on non-dual Vedanta and then start saying that all this is false, well, at a different level it is all false. It is when you are seeing this and dealing with it, for you it is very, very real in this context. Just to give you an example, that it is when you are seeing a movie, then in movies certain incidents are happening, and you know that will be in the movie, that will be the this consequence of that within the movie. Like you see, somebody is shooting with a gun and killing somebody. So you assume, and that happens in the movie, that yes, this person got killed by the bullet from this man. Now, it is true in the framework of the movie that this fellow A killed that fellow B. But both are actors and both are very nicely alive. They may get even the prize for best actors and so forth later, and it is fine, they are not dead. That man who hit the bullet, that he is not convicted of any crime, and the one who was hit didn't actually die either. So it is, but in the movie that is what happens. So it is true in this movie context. So our this names, we have names. It is, suppose I ask one of you, hey, what's your name? Well, and if you had, say, read recently some Vedanta text, non-dual Vedanta text, and if you say, I am the all-pervading, non-dual Paramatma, well, that is not exactly the truth in that context. So, if you are on that plane, yes, it is like you meet that actor who was in the movie actually was shot dead. Eh? How are you alive? Hey, I thought that you were killed that day. And in the movie he was killed. So, actually alive. So, it is true that you are non-dual Paramatma from a different standpoint. But not here. This used to happen at Thousand Island Park when Swami Vivekananda was teaching these great Vedantic truths. It's a great book. So, there is, in the memoirs, there is one incident. One gentleman would come and say, all this boils down to this, isn't it, Swami? That I am Brahman, isn't it? I am God. It all boils down to that, isn't it? And as Swami Vivekananda would say, well, in your true nature, you are Brahman, you are God. And then when that man would enter, when everybody is having breakfast late, then Vivekananda would remark, today Brahman has come late for breakfast. So, it is just to tell that at the level of phenomena or the empirical level, this is the truth that is to be remembered, and it is therefore very important for our day-to-day living in the given frame of time, space, causation. It should not be negated there. Then otherwise you will make a big folly. It is indispensable tool used in all our interactions. This was one of the first things that I was told by some senior monks, because every day we used to have class on this Vedanta text, Upanishads and Shankara's commentary and all that, and then sometimes I would say, well, that Swami would, hey, why did you not come for prayers today? And I would say, well, who is to pray? All is God. I am God whether I pray or not, isn't it? Don't confuse between the absolute and relative. Don't confuse the two levels. So it is to be remembered that in our day-to-day interactions, this is to be done. If we confuse them, it creates, one goes to lunatic asylums rather than becoming a person of highest wisdom because of this confusion. And actually, I have seen a few cases where that person would read those high level Advaitic texts like Yoga Vasishtha and such. Yoga Vasishtha is a good example. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to, not let especially the householders, devotees, to read that book. Don't read those things. Why? Because you may confuse the relative and the absolute, and that confusion should be avoided. So this is called Vyavharik Satta, and the problems with that is that it is limited in the context of time, space. The time has gone, and then we are left with the question, well, was that real? And because everything that we see living dies, then was that real? Who is that comes and that goes? Where does that come from? Where does it go? So these contradictions that show up when we compare that very thing in the other context. So we always therefore have the feeling that there is something that is absolute beyond this. And then there is another idea that in fact Shankaracharya was credited with this distinction, that Vyavharik means the truth that is true at the empirical level within that context, and there are things which are not true even in the empirical context, although we see that. For example, a common example, we all see horizon. Does it exist? Although we see it, we know it does not exist. It is an optical illusion, because when we apply other means of verification, we can never reach there. Had it really been there, we would have been able to reach there. And so it is that it is non-existent although we see it. So it is called visual deception. We see that the earth is flat, but then when compared with our other sense perceptions and reasoning, we see that it is round, it is not flat, although visually, because of the limitations of our visual sense, we cannot identify it as round. In fact, I used to argue when in early childhood that round? No! See, I would fall down, isn't it? If it is round, I can stand very well. I don't fall. Even if I run, I don't fall. Had it been like a ball, but when we do the testing through various different sense organs and intellect, it turns out that although our vision tells us that earth is flat, it is actually not flat. All the magic depends on this visual deception, lot of it, that it is something you see, but then it is not the actuality. You see that a person is actually killed there with a sword. You see the blood oozing out and so forth. But that was a deception. It didn't really happen like that. You immediately know that it is not true. So that is what is called pratibhasika. Another example of this is that Well, you see, the water, it is, and I told about it I saw it as water, but when I tested with my sense of touch, I found that it is ice, it is not water. It is like that. It is we see, but it is not true. I have fallen a few times on this lanes here in winter because there was the what is called black ice, and it visually it was not there. But when I stepped on it, and then I got a nice hit in the back. So that is how you see that there was ice that I could not see. So it is an illusory appearance even in day to day life due to contradictions. Some, as you wake up from the dream, the experience of the dream, although you remember that I saw that, you now know that it is not real. But in the dream, it was real. So, when the experience generated by one sense is contradicted by other senses or by reasoning, the experience in the day, in the dream or in the daydreaming, so that is that. And now we come to the this. Why are we discussing this? Because what we see, although in the realm of a given context, could be true, yet when we analyze it further, we see that there is another deeper and more pervasive level of truth where although this was true in a context, this loses its validity at that level. So, and that is what is called the Paramarthik Satya, which is true in all situations, true for all time, space, causal variations. That truth never becomes untruth. It is beyond all the space, time, and causation limitations. It is just to extend that analogy that I was talking about, the analogy of movie, that it is in a given movie context, certain things were real. But in another movie, that will not be real. So, but the screen was real in this movie, that movie, and even when you were seeing various pictures and various actions, various movements, you were always seeing the screen. You were aware of the screen and the figure appearing on that screen. Both, where you were aware of. If you were aware actually only of the person, your response would have been to that person and that situation. For example, if you see in the movie, and these days, the screens are made, the theaters are made so well that it becomes kind of a live experience for many. So, if you see that somebody is falling down and getting hurt, you would get up from your seat to help that fellow. Do you do that? You don't do that. Because you know that although it is that person, it is actually the screen behind that is appearing as that person. So, even though we are seeing that person, we are not seeing just that person. The screen appearing as that person is what we are seeing. And that screen is the stable, unchanging reality of everything in that movie. So, similarly, what is the unchanging reality in this whole universe? This question has been tackled by the what gets called as spiritual seekers or the great sages who have reached the end of that journey. They have analyzed it from the two sides. One is from the side of the perceiver, and the other is from the side of the perceived. The side of the perceiver is, well, what is called you, our own self. I. I am seeing all this. I am experiencing everything. That is the constant factor in every experience, not only the experience of waking state, but also in the dream state as well as in the deep sleep state. The I was asleep. I saw the dream, and now I am seeing you and talking with you. In all the three, the I does not change. Now, what is this I then? Inquiry into that proceeds, that who is this I? And one comes gradually to the conclusion that it cannot be body, it cannot be mind, because those things change and I is unchangeable. That is one of the important tools by which one arrive at this conclusion. That so I does not have any particularized attribute of name, form, time, space, causation. All these attributes are not the attributes of I. And then where does it leave us, friends? It leaves us no alternative but to see this I as all pervading, eternal, and thus everything is this self. Self that we began looking at as if something inside this body now, by analysis, it has become now understood as the all pervading and eternal reality. Everything is self. And now proceeds the what is called sadhana, the spiritual practice, to convert this understanding into experience that gets called as yoga. So this is one way. Through yoga, thus you come to this experience of the all-pervading self. So, but this is tackled also from the other side, that this all-pervading reality, what it is, you try to analyze it, and then you see it is made of the different elements. Everything that you see, including this your own body and mind, is made of certain elements, and therefore actually they are same. And there is the differences only in the size, shape, and therefore the name given to that size and shape of that heap. All is made of these same fundamental particles, whether it is coronavirus, or whether it is this chair, or whether this is this person, this Swami. All actually is, in modern these terms, the fundamental particles combined in various ways. So put together in various ways, and so one way of putting them together is called coronavirus. Another way of putting that is called the mountain Himalaya. Another way of putting that is called sun. Another way of putting it will get called the black hole, and so forth. So you come to the conclusion that by analyzing the objective experience, not the subject but the object, that all is one reality, the Brahman. So you can look at it from the Atman side or the Brahman side, you come to the same conclusion. And both of these, they have their particular ways of practicing the yoga. I am not going to talk about it right now, but then the scriptures say that this Brahman is the goal. In all Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, this Brahman or the one's own self is the goal that is to be reached. This imagery that you see is the imagery from Mundaka Upanishad. In Mundaka Upanishad, it is described that, look, pranavo dhanusharo yatma brahmatal lakshamuchyate apramattena vedhavyam sharavat tanmayo bhavet. That it is, imagine your soul like the arrow. And now Brahman is the target where it has to be hit. And if you shoot properly, if you shoot without the wavering of the mind, with one pointed attention, what will happen? The arrow, the soul, and the Brahman, the target, that will become one, and that is called the goal of life. Not just arbitrarily, because everything that we are actually seeking in life, we get there, and that is why this is the goal of life. As Sri Ramakrishna always used to say, God realization is the goal of human being. Is the goal, not that it is a goal. This it could be an intermediate object that you are looking at, but the goal is a realization of God. So it is our fulfillment will come only there, not otherwise. So this is the goal of life, and one has to see how one can attain to that goal. And the last one, that reality that we were looking at, now this is a very beautiful way of looking at it. It is called anadhyasta vivarta. It is a technical term. The two terms combined in Vedanta, one is adhyasa and another is vivarta. Adhyasa means superimposition, and vivarta means without actually any change, you are perceiving the change. That is called vivarta. There is nothing has happened, but you are seeing the happening. That is called vivarta. It is, and these two ideas are very closely connected. That it is one thing gets superimposed on another thing, that is a perception that is like a common example given in Vedanta, that you are seeing, actually there is a piece of wood and you are seeing it as, say, a bear. Now it is a log of wood is not bear, but you have superimposed bear on that existing log of wood. So on Brahman, these names and forms have been superimposed, and the Brahman is real. The superimposition is not real, it goes away. So this is called this adhyasa, that one thing appearing as another. Now vivarta is that it is to show that the process of this log of wood appearing as a bear, is the wood gets transformed into bear? It is not transformation. Not that even somebody has put a bear from somewhere and put it there. There are four categories told of, that actually where you see one thing and then another thing getting out of it. One is like you procure it, apya. Then you manufacture it, called utpadya. The third thing is like it was there, but you clean it, called sanskarya. And then you bring some modification into it, like you get yogurt by from the milk by changing something there, a little modification, that is called vikara. So these are the four. But this world is seen where God alone is. What kind of this transformation? It is called vivarta. Means nothing has really happened. None of these four categories, but it is appearing like this. And this is anadhyasta vivarta now, is where there is this transformation, but there is no deception involved, no superimposition involved. And one example, this word is used to show the experience and the life of incarnation of God, who see the world, who are in the world, and yet, as Shankaracharya mentions in his commentary, as if born. They were not actually born, but as if they were born, as if they lived, as if they showered grace on people. So, it is not really anything happened, and yet it has happened, but it is nothing of that is unreal, because that incarnation of God is the Brahman without any change. So this is the Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna would give this analogy that it is that, for example, he would call it Vijnana, that the same God has appeared in all these forms. So not that these forms are not there. These forms are the God appearing in all these forms. So the forms do not become unreal. Not like when you see the log of wood where you thought there is a bear. Now you don't see the bear. You say the bear was unreal. But the God has appeared in all these forms. These forms are just the appearance of God. And you can see both together. That like the ornaments made of gold. That is another example given in Vedanta to illustrate this point. Ornaments made of gold. And the great Saint Jnaneshwar gives this analogy very often, that ornaments carved out of gold. Now you are seeing the two things together there without any contradiction. Is that necklace or is that gold? Well, both are there. Not that seeing the gold means negation of the particular ornament. It is necklace. Yes, it is necklace. And is it gold? Yes, it is gold. There is no contradiction involved. So, this is the term used for this day. Sri Ramakrishna would call it as Vijnana. That it is. And then this is how the life of God incarnation is described. That it is real. You see, it is Brahman. That is Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna is Brahman in human form. Krishna is Brahman in human form. That is how many sages have described in Bhagavatam. They have described Krishna as the Brahman playing flute on the banks of Jamuna. That is how many Christian theologians describe Jesus, that it is the Word becoming flesh. The God appearing in this flesh form. So, this word, that anadhyasta vivarta, is another kind of, the existence, description of existence. So, we have seen today all these four levels, and each of them, except the pratibhasika, the visual deception, apart from that, all are true at that level, in that context. But like the context of the ultimate all-pervading reality in every context it is true. Beyond all context, it is real. So, therefore, the other these things, other levels of truth, are to be used to approach that ultimate truth, the truth that we call the vyavharik, or the contextual truth, that we should use to realize the absolute truth. So, thank you, friends. Now we shall just meditate for 30 seconds on this idea, and then in case you have any questions, those who have questions on the web, our operator there, Jitendra, he will read out those questions and we shall try to discuss those. Yes, Jitendra?
Yes, Maharaj. First question from Girish Mari. Is the basic perception function / result same in all brains, though the conclusion can be different? That is the same response to stimuli generated by all the normal senses, but the post-processing of the senses different?
That is a good question. Yeah, it is more or less same, to a great extent similar in human beings. The processing happens in a similar fashion. There may be minor distinctions due to the age and such things, that the process, the speed would be faster or slower in persons, but it is more or less same. But when you change the species, it could be different. So, and the response, as I mentioned, varies a lot. But the process, what is called in yoga aphorisms as shabda, that getting the signal and then carrying the signal to the brain, it remains to a great extent similar.
Another question from Suhas. Swamiji, when I study Advaita Vedanta, I come to an understanding that all existence appears in pure consciousness, and existence is not something that is independent. Am I right in my thinking?
Yes, perfectly right. It is true that the existence is therefore one of the ways of describing the Brahman, that yes, it is Sat Chit Ananda. So that Sat part is the existence. So it is all appearing there. The mistake is that what gets perceived as name and form, we do not uh, you know feel that they are constantly changing things, and that is why we get deceived. And so therefore that which does not exist appears to be existing, like the names and forms. They get in our day to day this behavior. If we see name and form, no problem, in fact we have to see, but we have to see along with that the underlying same reality that appears in the form of all names and forms. Then that will be the right understanding of what exists.
Question from Charlie. How does everything being made of same particles prove that there is one ultimate being?
Please repeat the last sentence, special last.
How
Everything
does
may. Huh.
how does everything being made of same particles prove that there is one ultimate being?
Because that same particle is in everything, and that is why all are same. Like you have, suppose, the different heaps of, say, sugar, or another very well known example, you have in Madame Tussauds museum all the different statues made of wax. So as wax they are all same. It is so exactly like that. When we transcend name and form, then we see that the existence is same. And one aspect there in the name and form is they are not permanent. They keep on shifting and changing, and therefore by the time you say that that is real, it has already undergone change. And so the unchanging reality is same in all, and you can see that because it is the same particles which are assembled differently, different heaps, different shapes, that's it.
Charlie says, what about a vacuum?
Yes, vacuum also. If the vacuum doesn't have the gross particles, but the subtle particles are there, because of which you can think of vacuum.
Question from Chris. Is Vijnana attainable for a normal person, or is it a state only the avatar and his companions reach?
Well, ordinary person can think of it, Vijnana. But for an ordinary person, as Sri Ramakrishna has said, can attain to the highest level of that realization, but will not be able to retain the body after realizing the ultimate truth, and that cannot be spoken. So therefore, the experience of Vijnana is really not for ordinary people. It is the post knowledge of the reality that this experience of Vijnana appears. Yeah.
This is not a question, this is a request from Dinesh Baveja, and Muni Krishna also support that request. His request is, Swamiji, please conduct lectures in Hindi too. A humble request.
Well, I am sorry. From this platform, I will not be conducting lectures in Hindi. Sorry, I will not be able to grant that request.
That's all, Maharaj.
Okay, then we shall conclude with the regular closing prayers. Before that, let me read the next programs. Next programs now, as you know, it is just the entry is not available, at least during this month of April. So everybody has to attend these programs only online. The next Sunday is actually the Holy Easter Sunday. And the topic for our discussion, therefore, is transcending death. The Tuesday and Friday classes at 7:30 p.m. Will go on also as usual, online only. It is the Tuesday topic is Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play, and Friday it is the stories from Srimad Bhagavatam. The Saturday guided meditation and the daily these meditations, prayers, they are not now available for the visitors. So that's about it. I wish you all the best, and please take care that in the world as we perceive it, at the practical empirical level, coronavirus is real. And so please take all the precautions necessary to protect yourself from that. Uh, Now let's go to closing prayer. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahur Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.